The doctor's words were still echoing in the hospital room when my daughter-in-law pulled out her phone and started texting. "Mrs. Sutton, I'm sorry. The stroke was severe. Your husband has significant brain damage. He can't speak, can't move his right side, requires full-time care. I need to be direct with you. Leon's not coming back from this. This is his new reality." 74 years old, married to Leon for 51 years, and in one moment our life together ended. Not death, something worse. He was alive but gone, present but absent. I sat beside his hospital bed, holding his left hand, the only one that could still weakly squeeze mine, and I tried to process what full-time care meant for us. That's when I heard Nadia, my son Marcus's wife, whispering into her phone just outside the room. "No, he's not dying. Worse, he's going to need a nursing home. Expensive care for years, maybe decades. All their money will go to facilities. We need to move fast before everything's gone. If we can get power of attorney over Irene while she's in shock, we can protect the assets before they're wasted on Leon's care." I sat very still, Leon's weak hand in mine, and I listened to my daughter-in-law plan how to exploit my shock to steal control of everything Leon and I had built in 51 years of marriage. They thought this was the end. Leon's stroke, my devastation, our life together over. They thought I was broken. That shock had made me weak, pliable, easy to control. That was their first mistake. Because what they thought was the end was just a pause. A terrible, painful pause where I had to figure out how to care for my husband, protect our assets, and defend myself against people who saw his tragedy as their opportunity. I didn't cry. I didn't confront Nadia. I didn't make a scene. I sat there holding Leon's hand, watching the man I'd loved for 51 years try to form words he could no longer speak, and I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Not just grief, not just fear about the future. Clarity about what I was facing, and determination to make sure Leon's stroke didn't become their payday. Now listen, before I tell you what happened after my husband's stroke when family started circling like vultures, before I show you what happens when people mistake shock for weakness, I need you to do something. If you're watching this and someone tried to exploit you during a medical crisis, hit subscribe right now. Comment where you're from, because what happened when they thought the end was just a pause, you need to hear every word. Turn on notifications. This goes places they never saw coming. Leon's stroke happened on a Wednesday morning. We were having coffee, talking about our plans to visit our grandson Tyler's baseball game that weekend. Leon was mid-sentence when his face changed. "Irene, my arm." He collapsed. I called 911. The ambulance came within 8 minutes. But 8 minutes was too long. By the time they got Leon to the hospital, significant brain damage had already occurred. The clot had destroyed parts of his brain responsible for speech and motor control. "Massive ischemic stroke," the neurologist explained. "The damage is permanent. With intensive therapy, he might regain some function. But Mrs. Sutton, you need to prepare for the likelihood that Leon will need full-time skilled nursing care for the rest of his life." The rest of his life. Leon was 76. He could live another 10, 15, maybe 20 years. All of them requiring care I couldn't provide alone at 74. I called Marcus, our only child, to tell him what happened. He arrived at the hospital within an hour, bringing Nadia with him. "Mom, how are you holding up?" Marcus asked, pulling me into a hug. "I'm managing, scared, but managing." "What did the doctors say?" I explained the damage, the permanent deficits, the need for long-term care. Marcus looked devastated. He loved his father. I didn't doubt that. But Nadia, I watched her face as I explained, and I saw something else. Not grief, not concern. Calculation. "Irene, you can't possibly care for Leon at home," she said with practiced sympathy. "He'll need professional care, a skilled nursing facility." "I know. Those are expensive, thousands of dollars a month, for years potentially. Irene, have you and Leon planned for this financially?" That was the moment I should have recognized what was happening. But I was in shock, overwhelmed, trying to figure out how to help my husband. So I answered honestly. We have savings, the house is paid off, we have investments. Leon has long-term care insurance. How much in savings? I should have said it was none of her business. But my mind was on Leon, not on protecting information. About $430,000. Plus the house is worth maybe $520,000. And Leon's insurance should cover most of the facility costs. I watched Nadia absorb this information. Nearly $1 million in assets. Irene, you need to be strategic about this. Nursing homes can drain assets quickly, even with insurance. You should talk to an estate planning attorney about protecting what you can. I'll handle it. Right now, I just need to focus on Leon. That was when she'd stepped outside to make that phone call, the one I'd overheard. We need to move fast before everything's gone. Get power of attorney over Irene while she's in shock. Protect the assets before they're wasted on Leon's care. After visiting hours ended, Marcus and Nadia left. I stayed with Leon, holding his hand, watching him sleep fitfully. We're going to get through this, I whispered, even though he couldn't hear me, couldn't respond. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to make sure you're safe. And I'm not letting anyone use this against us. The next morning, Nadia was back, without Marcus this time. Irene, I did some research last night. I found a really good estate planning attorney. I made an appointment for you this afternoon. He can help you protect your assets before they're consumed by care costs. That's thoughtful, but I can find my own attorney. I know, but this is specialized. Elder law, Medicaid planning, asset protection. This attorney knows how to structure things so Leon gets the care he needs while preserving your financial security. Please, let me help you with this. She was being so helpful, so concerned. If I hadn't overheard that phone call, I might have believed she was genuinely trying to help. I appreciate it, but I'm not making any decisions right now. I need time to think. Irene, time is exactly what you don't have. Every day Leon is in the hospital racks up bills. Every day that passes is a day you're not protecting your assets. You need to act fast. That was the moment I understood what she was doing. Urgency, pressure. Act fast before you lose everything. Classic high-pressure sales tactics. Except she was selling me on handing over control of my own finances. I didn't argue, I observed. Let me think about it. Don't think too long. These things have timing requirements. If you wait too long, it's too late to protect anything. After she left, I sat in Leon's hospital room and I thought about what I'd heard. Get power of attorney over Irene while she's in shock. Power of attorney would give Marcus and Nadia legal control over my finances. They could make decisions about my assets, my property, my life. And once they had that control, there was no guarantee they'd use it for Leon's benefit or mine. I needed help, real help, from someone I could trust. I called our attorney, Raymond Torres. He'd handled our estate planning for 20 years. Raymond, Leon had a stroke. Severe. He's going to need long-term care. And I think my daughter-in-law is trying to pressure me into signing power of attorney so she can control our assets. What makes you think that? I told him about the overheard phone call, the urgent pressure to see her chosen attorney, the emphasis on protecting assets and acting fast. Raymond was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Irene, that sounds like the setup for financial exploitation. They're using Leon's crisis to create panic so you make decisions that benefit them, not you. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to any appointments with attorneys you didn't choose yourself. And let me come to the hospital so we can make sure your current estate documents are protecting you appropriately. Raymond came that afternoon. He brought updated power of attorney forms, designating my niece Sandra, who lived across the country and had no financial interest in my estate, as my attorney in fact instead of Marcus. If something happens to you while you're caring for Leon, Sandra will make decisions in your best interest, not in the best interest of someone who might benefit financially from your incapacity. He also reviewed our current assets and Leon's long-term care insurance. You're in better shape than most people. The insurance will cover most of facility costs. Your savings can supplement. You're not going to lose everything, Irene. You can afford good care for Leon without impoverishing yourself. Anyone telling you otherwise is either misinformed or lying to create panic. That evening, Nadia came back with papers. Irene, I brought the power of attorney forms from the estate attorney. They're already filled out. You just need to sign. It designates Marcus as your attorney in fact, so he can help you manage everything while you're focused on Leon. I already have power of attorney documents. I don't need new ones. Who did you designate? My niece Sandra. Nadia's face changed. The sympathetic mask slipped slightly. Your niece, Irene, she lives in California. She doesn't know your financial situation. Marcus is your son. He should be the one making decisions for you if you can't. Sandra is trustworthy and has no financial interest in my estate. That makes her a better choice. You're not thinking clearly. The stress of Leon's situation is clouding your judgment. Irene, please, let us help you. There it was again. You're not thinking clearly. Setting up the narrative that I was too overwhelmed to make good decisions. My judgment is fine. I've consulted with our attorney. I've made my decisions. I don't need Marcus to have power of attorney. What if something happens to you? What if you get sick or hurt while caring for Leon? Sandra is across the country. She can't help. Marcus is here. He's your son. He deserves to be the one who. Deserves? Nadia, power of attorney isn't about what someone deserves. It's about who I trust to make decisions in my best interest. And you don't trust your own son. I trust my son. I don't trust the person who was on the phone yesterday discussing how to protect assets before they're wasted on Leon's care. Nadia, I heard you, outside the hospital room, planning how to get power of attorney over me while I was in shock. I know what you're trying to do. Her face went completely cold. You're making a huge mistake. Leon's care is going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. You're going to lose everything. And when you do, don't come crying to Marcus and me for help. I won't need to. I have insurance. I have savings. I have a plan that doesn't involve handing control of my life to people who see my husband's stroke as an opportunity. She left without another word. I sat with Leon, watching him sleep, and I felt the weight of what I was facing settle fully. Leon needed care. I needed to arrange that care. I needed to manage our finances, our home, our lives. And I needed to do it while defending against family members who thought his stroke was the end of our independence and the beginning of their control. That was the moment I understood something crucial. They thought Leon's stroke was the end of our active life, the end of our autonomy, the end of our control over our own assets and decisions. They saw the stroke as a period, full stop. Everything after was just managing decline and spending money until we were both gone. But they were wrong. Leon's stroke wasn't the end. It was a pause. A terrible pause where I had to recalibrate our life, find new ways to care for him, adjust to a new reality. But it wasn't the end of my capacity to think, plan, or protect us. That miscalculation was going to cost them everything. Over the next 2 weeks, while Leon was stabilized in the hospital and I researched care facilities, Marcus and Nadia escalated their campaign. They brought financial advisors to the hospital, just to consult with you about protecting your assets. They brought elder law attorneys, just to explain your options for Medicaid planning. They brought facility administrators from the cheapest nursing homes they could find, just to show you what's available in your price range. Every suggestion was framed as helping me. Every pressure tactic was disguised as concern. But I recognized what was happening. They were trying to overwhelm me with information and urgency, so I'd hand over control just to make the pressure stop. I declined every meeting, every consultation, every helpful suggestion. I'm handling it myself. Mom, you can't handle this alone. It's too much. I'm not alone. I have Raymond. I have Sandra. I have the insurance company case manager. I have everything I need. You're being stubborn, and it's going to cost you everything. Then I'll lose everything on my own terms, making my own decisions. I'm not signing power of attorney to you. Stop asking. After 2 weeks, Leon was stable enough to transfer to a skilled nursing facility. The insurance approved coverage. I chose a facility that was clean, well-staffed, and close enough for me to visit daily. The cost, $8,200 per month. Insurance covered $6,800. I'd pay $1,400 out of pocket. With my savings and Social Security, I could afford that indefinitely without touching the house or investments. I wasn't losing everything. I was managing a difficult situation appropriately. But Marcus and Nadia wouldn't let it go. 1 week after Leon moved to the facility, I came home from visiting him to find Marcus and Nadia in my living room. They'd let themselves in with Marcus's key, a key I'd given him years ago for emergencies. "Mom, we need to talk." "How did you get in my house?" "I still have the key you gave me. Mom, we're worried about you. You're making terrible decisions. You chose the most expensive facility you could find. You're depleting your savings when there are cheaper options. You're refusing help from people who actually care about you. Get out of my house." "Not until you listen. Mom, Dad's care is going to bankrupt you. Within a year, maybe 2, you'll have nothing left. Then what? You'll lose the house. You'll have to go on Medicaid. You'll end up in some state facility yourself because you were too proud to accept help." I didn't yell. I didn't engage with the scare tactics. I just said quietly, "Give me your key and leave my house." "Mom." "Give me your key. You used it without permission to enter my house without my consent. That's not an emergency. That's trespassing. Give me the key or I'm calling the police." Marcus looked hurt. "You'd call the police on your own son." "You broke into my house to pressure me about decisions I've already made. Yes, I'd call the police. Key, now." He handed over the key. They left. And I sat in my violated living room, shaking slightly, and I understood something new. This wasn't going to stop. They weren't going to accept my refusal gracefully. They were going to keep pushing, keep pressuring, keep escalating. Because they thought time was on their side. That eventually I'd get tired of fighting, overwhelmed by Leon's care, worn down by the pressure. They thought what started as the end, Leon's stroke, would eventually break me completely. But they didn't understand what I'd learned in 51 years of marriage to Leon. Pauses aren't endings. They're just moments where you stop, reassess, and figure out how to move forward differently. Leon's stroke was the worst pause of our lives, but it was still just a pause. And I was going to use it to prepare for what came next. 2 days after the house incident, something happened that showed me exactly what came next. I received a certified letter from an attorney I'd never heard of, Bradley Hoffman, elder law specialist. "Dear Mrs. Sutton, I represent your son, Marcus Sutton, regarding concerns about your mental competence and ability to manage your affairs during your husband's medical crisis. Mr. Sutton reports that you are making irrational financial decisions, refusing necessary assistance, and exhibiting signs of cognitive decline that may be affecting your judgment. We are requesting that you undergo a comprehensive medical evaluation to assess your competence. If you refuse, Mr. Sutton may be forced to petition the court for guardianship to protect you from harmful decisions. Please respond within 10 days. Sincerely, Bradley Hoffman-esque." They thought Leon's stroke was the end of our independence. I thought it was just a pause before I showed them exactly how wrong they were. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the notification bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read Bradley Hoffman's letter 3 times, noting every carefully chosen word. Irrational financial decisions, signs of cognitive decline, protect you from harmful decisions. They were building a case to have me declared incompetent, not because I was actually incompetent, but because I'd refused to hand over control of my assets. I called Raymond immediately. They've hired an attorney threatening guardianship if I don't submit to a competency evaluation. Forward me the letter, I'll respond. But Irene, we need to get ahead of this. If they file for guardianship, we need overwhelming evidence that you're completely competent. Over the next week, Raymond and I built exactly that evidence. I got a comprehensive cognitive evaluation from Dr. Helen Marsh, a neuropsychologist specializing in elderly cognition. 3 hours of testing. Memory, problem-solving, judgment, decision-making. Her conclusion: Mrs. Sutton demonstrates cognitive function well above average for her age group. Excellent memory, sound judgment, clear understanding of her financial situation and care responsibilities. There is zero evidence of cognitive impairment or diminished capacity. She is fully competent to manage her own affairs. I had my primary care physician provide a statement confirming I had no medical conditions affecting my mental state. I had the insurance case manager provide documentation that I was managing Leon's care appropriately, attending all care meetings, making sound decisions about his treatment. I had my financial advisor provide records showing I was managing my accounts responsibly, paying bills on time, making appropriate financial decisions. Everything documented, everything proving I was managing a difficult situation competently. Raymond's response to Bradley Hoffman was surgical. Mr. Hoffman, I represent Mrs. Irene Sutton in response to your letter dated October 15th. Your client's characterization of Mrs. Sutton's mental state is false and appears motivated by financial interest rather than genuine concern. Mrs. Sutton recently underwent comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation. Report attached. Dr. Helen Marsh found Mrs. Sutton to be fully competent with cognitive function above average for her age. Your client's claims of irrational decisions refer to Mrs. Sutton's refusal to sign power of attorney giving him control of her finances. This is not irrational, it's appropriate self-protection. The harmful decisions your client references include: 1. Choosing a quality care facility for her husband, fully covered by insurance plus manageable out-of-pocket costs. 2. Refusing to attend meetings with financial advisors she didn't select. 3. Declining to transfer control of her assets to her son. These are sound decisions, not evidence of incompetence. If your client files for guardianship, we will oppose vigorously and present evidence that the petition is motivated by desire to access Mrs. Sutton's assets, not concern for her welfare. Mrs. Sutton is competent, is managing her husband's care appropriately, and does not require or want your client's protection. Sincerely, Raymond Torres-esque. 3 days after Raymond sent that letter, Marcus showed up at Leon's care facility while I was visiting. Mom, can we talk privately? We went to the family conference room. Marcus closed the door. Mom, I don't understand why you're fighting us. We're trying to help you. By threatening to have me declared incompetent if I don't do what you want. That letter was Nadia's idea. I didn't know she was going to do that. But you hired the attorney with her. You're the one claiming I'm incompetent. Marcus, you're using your father's stroke as an excuse to try to take control of assets you're not entitled to. I'm not trying to steal from you. I'm trying to protect you from bankrupting yourself on Dad's care. I'm not going bankrupt. I have insurance. I have savings. I can afford to care for your father appropriately. For how long? 5 years? 10? Mom, you're 74. What happens when you're 80 and still paying facility costs and your savings are gone? Then I'll adjust, downsize the house, use the home equity, figure it out. Marcus, that's my problem to solve, not yours. But it affects me. When you run out of money, when you need care yourself, who do you think is going to have to deal with that? Me. I'll be responsible for taking care of both of you. That was the moment I saw it clearly. Not concern for my welfare, concern for his own future burden. Marcus, you're worried that caring for your father now means I'll have nothing left to leave you later. That's what this is actually about. That's not fair. Isn't it? You're not worried I'll bankrupt myself. You're worried the inheritance you're counting on will be spent on your father's care instead of preserved for you. I deserve to be considered. Dad and you built that estate together. Some of it should come to me. And it will, when I'm dead. Until then, it's mine to use as I see fit, including using it to care for your father, the man who actually earned it with me. So you're just going to waste it all on expensive care when cheaper options exist. I'm going to provide the best care I can afford for the man I've been married to for 51 years. If that means there's less for you to inherit, Marcus, that's the cost of your father being cared for properly. His face went red. Fine, but don't expect me to take care of you when you've spent everything and have nothing left. I don't expect that. I've never expected that. Marcus, I expect to take care of myself. What I don't expect is having to fight my own son over my right to make my own decisions about my own husband's care. He left without another word. I sat in the conference room for a long time, trying to reconcile the son I'd raised with the man who just told me he deserved consideration over his own father's care. That evening, I received an email from Nadia. Not a letter from an attorney this time, a direct message. Irene, since you refuse to be reasonable, I'm going to be blunt. Marcus and I have done research. Leon's care facility costs $1,400 a month out of pocket. That's $16,800 per year. Your savings are $430,000. At that rate, you'll be out of money in about 25 years. If there are no emergencies, no increases in cost, no additional medical expenses. You're 74. If you live to 95, you'll have spent every penny. If you live longer, you'll have nothing. The smart move is to transfer assets to Marcus now. Establish a 5-year look-back period for Medicaid, move Leon to a Medicaid facility, and preserve the estate. But you're too proud to admit you need help. You're going to lose everything because you can't admit that Leon's stroke was the end of your independent life. When you're broke and desperate, don't come to us expecting help. You had your chance. Nadia. I read the email twice, then I forwarded it to Raymond. He called me back within an hour. Irene, she just admitted their entire plan. Transfer assets to Marcus to protect them from being spent on Leon's care. Move Leon to a Medicaid facility, which means a bare minimum care facility to save money. This isn't about your welfare. It's about preserving inheritance. I know. And Irene, her math is deliberately misleading. She's not accounting for your Social Security. She's not accounting for investment returns on your savings. She's not accounting for Leon's pension. She's creating a worst-case scenario to scare you into making decisions that benefit them. What should I do? Document it, save everything, and prepare for them to escalate. If they file for guardianship, this email is evidence that their motivation is financial, not protective. I didn't respond to Nadia's email. What would I say? That she was right, she wasn't. That I appreciated her concern, I didn't believe it was concern. I just saved it and continued doing what I'd been doing. Visiting Leon daily, managing his care, maintaining our finances, living my life. 2 weeks later, they filed the guardianship petition. The court notice arrived on a Tuesday. Emergency petition for guardianship over Irene Sutton, age 74, based on alleged diminished capacity and inability to manage her affairs during spouse's medical crisis. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. The petition was thorough and creative with the truth. It claimed I was overwhelmed by spouse's medical crisis to the point of impaired judgment, that I was making financially ruinous decisions regarding expensive care facilities, that I was refusing assistance from family and professionals, that I was isolating myself and exhibiting paranoid behavior toward people trying to help. Every claim was technically based on something real but twisted. Yes, Leon's crisis was overwhelming, but that didn't mean my judgment was impaired. Yes, I'd chosen an expensive facility, but it was appropriate care I could afford. Yes, I'd refused their assistance, but because it was predatory, not helpful. They were framing appropriate self-protection as paranoid isolation. Raymond reviewed the petition and shook his head. This is sophisticated. They've created a narrative that sounds plausible if you don't know the full context. We'll need strong evidence to counter it. We have strong evidence. Dr. Marsh's evaluation, my physician's statement. Financial records showing I'm managing appropriately. All good, But Irene, there's something else we need to address. They're going to claim that your refusal to move Leon to a cheaper facility shows poor judgment. We need to be able to explain why the facility you chose is appropriate and affordable. Over the next 2 weeks, I gathered even more documentation. The facility director provided a letter explaining that Leon's care needs, physical therapy, speech therapy, specialized stroke care, required the level of facility I'd chosen. Cheaper facilities couldn't provide appropriate care. The insurance case manager provided documentation that the facility was approved and that my out-of-pocket costs were within normal range for stroke care. My financial advisor provided a detailed analysis showing that my current spending was sustainable long-term, accounting for Social Security, pension income, and investment returns. I had everything documented, everything proving I was making sound decisions. But 3 days before the hearing, something happened that nearly destroyed my case. I was visiting Leon, sitting beside his bed, reading to him from the newspaper like I did every day. He couldn't respond verbally, but his eyes tracked me. His left hand squeezed mine when I paused. He was there, even if he couldn't communicate the way he used to. I was in the middle of reading the sports section when I felt dizzy. The room tilted. I reached for the bed rail to steady myself. "Mrs. Sutton, are you okay?" A nurse was beside me, guiding me to a chair. "Mrs. Sutton, you look pale. When did you last eat?" I tried to remember. Breakfast? Had I eaten breakfast? I'd been so focused on getting to the facility, on the upcoming hearing, on everything I needed to prepare. "I'm not sure." "You need to take care of yourself. You can't care for your husband if you collapse. Let me get you some juice and a snack." I sat in that chair, dizzy and disoriented, and I felt the weight of everything crash over me. Leon's stroke, the care decisions, the legal battles, the constant pressure from Marcus and Nadia, the upcoming guardianship hearing. I was 74 years old, managing a crisis that would challenge someone half my age, while fighting off family members who wanted to use that crisis against me. And I'd forgotten to eat. The nurse brought juice and crackers. I ate. The dizziness faded, but the incident was documented in the facility's records. Patient's wife appeared disoriented and lightheaded during visit. Reports not remembering when she last ate. Provided snack and fluids. Episode resolved. 2 days later, Marcus's attorney submitted that incident report as evidence in the guardianship case. Additional evidence of Mrs. Sutton's declining capacity, recent episode of disorientation and memory impairment documented by care facility staff. Patient unable to remember basic self-care eating. This supports petitioner's concerns about her ability to manage complex financial and care decisions. Raymond called me as soon as he saw the filing. "Irene, they're using the fact that you forgot to eat as evidence of cognitive decline. We need to address this head-on." I was stressed and overwhelmed. "I forgot to eat. That's not cognitive decline." "I know, but they're going to argue it shows you're not managing well. We need the facility to provide context, that this was a one-time incident, that you were appropriately responsive when reminded, that it's normal for caregivers to occasionally neglect self-care during stress." The facility director provided exactly that statement. Mrs. Sutton's episode was consistent with caregiver stress, not cognitive impairment. She responded appropriately to intervention, has not had any repeat incidents, and continues to manage her husband's care competently. This type of stress-related self-neglect is common among elderly caregivers and does not indicate diminished capacity. But the damage was done. Marcus and Nadia now had a documented incident they could point to as proof I wasn't managing well. The hearing took place on a gray November morning. Judge Patricia Chandler presiding. Present, Marcus and Nadia with their attorney Bradley Hoffman, me with Raymond Torres. Judge Chandler reviewed both petitions, theirs seeking guardianship, mine contesting it. "Mr. Hoffman, you filed first. Present your case." Bradley Hoffman stood. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of an elderly woman overwhelmed by her husband's medical crisis and making poor decisions as a result. Mrs. Sutton's husband suffered a severe stroke 6 weeks ago. Since then, Mrs. Sutton has chosen the most expensive care option available, refused help from family, isolated herself, and exhibited signs of declining self-care and judgment. He called Marcus first. "Mr. Sutton, describe your concerns about your mother." "She's not thinking clearly. Dad's stroke devastated her. I understand that. But instead of accepting help, she's made it a battle. She chose a facility that costs $16,000 a year out of pocket when there are cheaper options. She refuses to let me help manage finances. She's paranoid, thinking Nadia and I are trying to steal from her when we're just trying to protect her from bankrupting herself." "What happened when you tried to help?" "We brought estate planning attorneys to consult with her. She refused to meet with them. We brought financial advisors. She refused. We tried to give her information about more affordable facilities. She got angry and accused us of trying to warehouse Dad in a cheap facility. She's not rational about any of this." Raymond's cross-examination was precise. "Mr. Sutton, you testified your mother chose the most expensive care option available. Did you research what level of care your father actually needs for stroke recovery?" "I know there are cheaper facilities." "That's not what I asked. Did you research the specific care requirements for stroke patients at your father's level of impairment?" "No, but..." "So you don't actually know whether the facility your mother chose is appropriate for your father's needs. You just know it's expensive." "It's more expensive than necessary." "Based on what expertise? Are you a medical professional?" "No." "Have you consulted with your father's physicians about appropriate care settings?" "No." "So your opinion that the facility is more expensive than necessary is based on nothing but your assumption that cheaper would be fine. Mr. Sutton, how much does your mother pay out of pocket per month for your father's care?" "About $1,400. "And how much are her total monthly expenses, including the facility costs?" "I don't know exactly." "You're claiming she's going to bankrupt herself, but you don't know her total expenses or her income. How can you assess whether she can afford it?" "It's obviously too much if it's depleting her savings." "Is it depleting her savings? Have you seen her financial statements showing declining account balances?" "No, she won't share financial information with me." "Because it's none of your business. Mr. Sutton, one final question. Did you tell your mother she deserved to be considered when it came to her financial decisions about your father's care?" Marcus hesitated. "I said family should be considered." "Did you tell her you deserved consideration? Yes or no?" "I said I'd be affected by her decisions." "That sounds like yes. Mr. Sutton, you're not concerned your mother will bankrupt herself. You're concerned she'll spend your inheritance on your father's care. That's what this is actually about." Bradley Hoffman tried to recover by calling Nadia. "Mrs. Sutton, you've observed your mother-in-law closely during this crisis. What concerns you?" "She's overwhelmed and won't admit it. Leon's stroke broke something in her. She's become isolated, paranoid. She thinks everyone is against her. She had an episode at the facility where she forgot to eat and became disoriented. That's not normal. That's decline." "What do you think she needs?" "Someone to help her, to manage the complex financial and care decisions so she can just focus on supporting Leon emotionally. She needs guardianship for her own protection." Raymond's cross-examination was even sharper. "Mrs. Chen, you sent Mrs. Sutton an email explaining your plan to transfer her assets to your husband to avoid spending them on Leon's care. Do you remember that email?" Nadia's face went pale. "I was trying to help her understand her options." "You told her the smart move was to transfer assets to Marcus and move Leon to a Medicaid facility. That's not helping her. That's telling her to protect your inheritance at the expense of her husband's care quality." "I was explaining Medicaid planning." "You were explaining how to hide assets from being spent on Leon's care. Mrs. Chen, did you or did you not make a phone call outside the hospital the day after Leon's stroke discussing how to get power of attorney over Mrs. Sutton while she's in shock?" "I don't remember that specific call." "Mrs. Sutton heard you. She remembers every word. You said you needed to move fast before the assets were wasted on Leon's care. Does that sound like genuine concern for her welfare?" Nadia had no good answer. Then it was our turn. Raymond called Dr. Marsh. "Dr. Marsh, you evaluated Mrs. Sutton. What did you find?" "Cognitive function well above average for her age. Excellent memory, sound judgment, clear understanding of complex financial and care decisions. No evidence whatsoever of cognitive impairment or diminished capacity." "What about the incident where she forgot to eat?" "Completely consistent with caregiver stress, not cognitive decline. Caregivers frequently neglect self-care during crises. It's a stress response, not a competency issue. Mrs. Sutton responded appropriately when reminded, has taken steps to ensure it doesn't happen again, and continues to manage complex responsibilities competently." Bradley Hoffman tried to undermine the evaluation. "Dr. Marsh, couldn't stress-related incidents like forgetting to eat be warning signs of future decline?" They could be. They also could be isolated incidents during acute crisis. In Mrs. Sutton's case, I see no evidence of progressive decline, just temporary stress during an extraordinarily difficult situation. Raymond called me last. "Mrs. Sutton, your son claims you're making poor financial decisions. Are you?" "No, I'm choosing appropriate care for my husband within my budget. I've consulted with insurance, with financial advisors I selected myself, with care facility experts. Every decision has been carefully considered." "Can you afford the facility you chose?" "Yes, insurance covers most of it. My out-of-pocket cost is manageable with my income and savings. I've run the numbers thoroughly. I can sustain this long-term." "Why did you refuse your son's help?" "Because it wasn't help. It was pressure to hand over control of my finances and move my husband to cheaper care to preserve assets for inheritance. I overheard the plan the day after Leon's stroke. This was never about protecting me. It was about protecting their financial interests." "Are you competent to manage your own affairs?" "Yes, I'm managing an extraordinarily difficult situation. My husband of 51 years had a devastating stroke. I'm grieving while also handling complex care decisions and financial planning. It's overwhelming, but overwhelming doesn't mean incompetent. I'm handling it appropriately, and I don't need someone else taking control of my life." The hearing lasted 3 hours. Judge Chandler said she'd issue a written ruling within 1 week. That was the longest week of my life since Leon's stroke. When the ruling came, Raymond called me. "We won. She denied the guardianship petition." Judge Chandler's decision was 8 pages. The conclusion: "This court finds that Mrs. Irene Sutton is fully competent to manage her own affairs. The evidence presented by petitioners consists largely of disagreements with Mrs. Sutton's decisions, not actual evidence of incompetence. Mrs. Sutton is managing an extraordinarily difficult situation, caring for a spouse with severe stroke damage while maintaining her own household and finances. She is doing so competently, as evidenced by comprehensive medical evaluation, professional assessments, and her own testimony. The incident of forgetting to eat is concerning only as a reminder that caregivers must attend to self-care. It is not evidence of cognitive decline. More concerning is the evidence suggesting petitioner's motivation is financial rather than protective. The email discussing asset transfer and the overheard conversation about obtaining power of attorney, while she's in shock, suggest this petition is about controlling Mrs. Sutton's assets, not protecting her welfare. The petition is denied. Mrs. Sutton remains in full control of her affairs. Furthermore, petitioners are warned that filing additional frivolous petitions could result in sanctions. They thought Leon's stroke was the end of our independence, our control, our life as we'd known it. They thought wrong. It was just a pause, a terrible, painful pause where everything changed. But it wasn't the end. And 3 weeks after the hearing, something happened that proved just how much they'd miscalculated. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the notification bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. 3 weeks after winning the guardianship hearing, I was sitting with Leon during his afternoon physical therapy session when the facility's social worker, Patricia Kim, asked to speak with me privately. "Mrs. Sutton, I wanted to update you on something. We've had several inquiries from family members asking about Leon's care and your financial situation here. Specifically, someone called asking how much you pay out of pocket, whether you're current on payments, and whether we've observed any signs that you're struggling to afford care." "Who called?" They identified themselves as family conducting wellness checks. "But Mrs. Sutton, we don't give out that information to anyone without patient consent. I'm telling you because the calls have been persistent, 3 times in the past 2 weeks." They were still investigating, still building a case, still trying to find evidence I was failing somehow. "Thank you for telling me, and thank you for not sharing information." "Of course, but Mrs. Sutton, I want you to know, if you ever do struggle financially, we have social workers who can help. Payment plans, financial assistance programs, resources. You don't have to handle everything alone." "I appreciate that. Right now I'm managing fine, but I'll remember that if things change." After Patricia left, I sat watching Leon work with the physical therapist. His right side was still paralyzed, but his left side was getting stronger. He could sit up with minimal assistance now. He could grip objects with his left hand. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. What they thought was the end, Leon completely incapacitated, requiring total care forever, was actually showing signs of being something different. Leon was improving, slowly, but measurably. "Good session today, Mrs. Sutton," the therapist said as she helped Leon back into his wheelchair. "He's making real progress. I think we might be able to start working on standing with support soon." Progress, not recovery to what he was before, that wasn't possible. But progress toward a new normal that was better than the worst-case scenario everyone had assumed. That evening, I got a call from Sandra, my niece in California. "Aunt Irene, I got a strange call today. Someone claiming to be conducting a family wellness check on you, asking if I'd noticed signs of you struggling, whether you'd asked me for money, whether I was concerned about your judgment. I told them you seemed fine and to stop calling me. But Aunt Irene, who would do that?" "Marcus and Nadia. They lost the guardianship case, so now they're trying to build evidence for another attempt. Calling everyone connected to me, fishing for concerns." "That's harassment. Can't you stop them?" "Not easily. They're not contacting me directly, so they're not violating any orders. They're just investigating, building files, waiting for me to fail somehow so they can point to it and say, 'See, we were right.'" "What are you going to do?" "Keep doing what I'm doing, managing Leon's care, managing my life, not failing. Eventually they'll realize I'm not going to collapse and give them an opening." But I was wrong about that. They weren't waiting for me to fail naturally. They were planning to create failure. 2 weeks later, I received notice that my homeowner's insurance had been canceled. "Dear Mrs. Sutton, your homeowner's insurance policy is canceled effective December 1st due to non-payment. Your payment of $2,847 was due October 15th and remains unpaid despite multiple notices. If you wish to reinstate coverage, you must pay the overdue premium plus a $200 reinstatement fee within 10 days. I stared at the notice, confused. I'd set up automatic payment for insurance years ago. It came out of my checking account every October without me having to think about it. I called the insurance company. "I have automatic payments set up. Why wasn't the premium paid?" "Ma'am, the automatic payment was canceled in September. We sent notice to the address on file." I never canceled automatic payment, and I never received any notice. "Let me check." The cancellation request came through our website on September 18th. Someone logged into your account and changed the payment method to manual billing. I didn't do that. I don't even use your website. Someone accessed my account without authorization. I checked my mail from September and October carefully. No insurance notices. Nothing about payment due or automatic payment cancellation. Someone had accessed my insurance account, canceled automatic payment, and intercepted the payment notices so I wouldn't know until the policy was canceled. I paid the overdue premium and reinstatement fee immediately. Then I called Raymond. Someone is sabotaging my accounts. They accessed my insurance website, canceled automatic payment, and apparently intercepted mail so I wouldn't know until the policy lapsed. Do you know who? Marcus or Nadia. They're trying to create evidence that I'm not managing my affairs competently. A lapsed insurance policy is exactly the kind of thing they could point to in another guardianship petition. Change all your passwords. Enable two-factor authentication on every account. And Irene, we need to document this. If they try for guardianship again, we'll show this was sabotage, not incompetence. I spent the next 2 days securing every account. Bank accounts, insurance, investments, utilities. Everything got new passwords, new security questions, two-factor authentication. And I documented the insurance cancellation incident thoroughly. Screenshots, phone records, everything showing it was unauthorized access, not my failure to manage. 3 days later, something else happened. I went to pay for groceries and my credit card was declined. I'm sorry, ma'am, this card isn't working. Do you have another form of payment? I paid with a different card and called the credit card company from the parking lot. Your account was closed on November 20th at your request. I didn't request closure. I've had this card for 18 years. Why would I close it? The request came through our automated phone system. Someone called, verified your account information, and requested closure. Someone impersonated me, and you closed my account without verifying it was actually me. Ma'am, they provided your account number, social security number, and mother's maiden name. We had no reason to believe it wasn't you. Someone had enough of my personal information to impersonate me on phone calls, to close accounts, to sabotage my financial management. I documented this incident too. Then I put fraud alerts on all my credit reports and changed security questions to things no one in my family would know. But the sabotage didn't stop. 2 weeks later, the facility called me. Mrs. Sutton, your December payment hasn't been processed. The automatic transfer from your checking account was rejected. Is there a problem with the account? No, the account has plenty of money. Let me check what happened. I called my bank. Why was the automatic transfer to Leon's care facility rejected? That automatic payment was canceled on December 2nd. Someone called requesting cancellation of all automatic payments from your checking account. I didn't call. This is fraud. Someone is impersonating me and sabotaging my accounts. I set up the automatic payment again, paid the facility directly to make sure December was covered, and I documented this third incident of sabotage. Raymond reviewed everything. Irene, you need to file a police report. This is identity theft. Someone is using your personal information to access and sabotage your accounts. If I file a police report, Marcus and Nadia will use it as evidence I'm being exploited by scammers because I'm not competent enough to protect my information. Or we use it as evidence that they're deliberately sabotaging you to create the appearance of incompetence. Irene, the pattern is clear. Every failure benefits their narrative that you can't manage your affairs. File the report. Document everything. I filed the police report. Detective Andrew Chen took my statement about the insurance cancellation, credit card closure, and automatic payment sabotage. Mrs. Sutton, do you have any idea who's doing this? My son and daughter-in-law. They tried to get guardianship over me, claiming I'm incompetent. They lost. Now they're sabotaging my accounts to create evidence of incompetence for another attempt. That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof? I have proof the accounts were accessed and sabotaged. I have motive. They stand to benefit financially if I'm declared incompetent. I have timing. All the sabotage started after they lost the guardianship hearing. Detective, they're trying to manufacture evidence that I'm failing. I'll investigate, but Mrs. Sutton, proving who did this will be difficult if they were careful. The investigation went nowhere. The phone calls to close accounts came from burner phones. The website login for the insurance came from a public computer at a library. No direct evidence linking Marcus or Nadia to the sabotage. But the sabotage stopped after I filed the police report. Whoever was doing it realized I was documenting and reporting, and they backed off. For a while. Then, 6 weeks later, something happened that was worse than sabotage. I got a call from Patricia Kim, the facility social worker. Her voice was tense. "Mrs. Sutton, you need to come to the facility immediately. There's been an incident with Leon." I drove there in a panic, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Another stroke, a fall, an infection. When I arrived, Patricia met me in the lobby. "Leon is okay physically, but we need to talk about what happened. Someone came to visit him this morning claiming to be his son. They spent about 20 minutes alone with Leon in his room. After they left, Leon was extremely agitated, nonverbal but clearly distressed. It took us an hour to calm him down. Marcus, my son Marcus, visited. He said he was Leon's son. But Mrs. Sutton, Leon isn't on the approved visitor list except for you. We shouldn't have let anyone else in without calling you first. I'm very sorry. This was a breakdown in our procedures." "What did this person say to Leon?" "We don't know. The visit was private. But one of the nurses heard raised voices before the visitor left, and Leon has been distressed ever since." I went to Leon's room. He was in his wheelchair, staring out the window, his left hand clenched tight. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears. "Leon, sweetheart, what happened? What did Marcus say to you?" He couldn't tell me. He could only make sounds, squeeze my hand, look at me with an expression of such anguish that it broke my heart. Whatever Marcus had said, it had devastated him. I called Marcus immediately. "What did you say to your father?" I told him the truth, that you're bankrupting yourself paying for expensive care he doesn't need, that he should be in a cheaper facility so there's something left for the family, that he's being selfish letting you spend everything on him. I felt my blood run cold. You told your father, who can't speak, can't defend himself, can't respond, that he's being selfish for being sick, that his care is bankrupting me. He needs to understand reality. He had a stroke, Marcus. He didn't choose to be sick. And you went to his facility, bypassed the visitor restrictions, and verbally abused your own father to manipulate him into feeling guilty about needing care. I wasn't abusing him. You told a man who can't speak that he's a burden. That's abuse. Marcus, you're not allowed at his facility anymore. I'm putting explicit instructions that you're banned from visiting. You can't do that. He's my father. And he's my husband. And you just traumatized him to try to pressure me into moving him to cheaper care. You're done. Don't contact me. Don't contact Leon. Don't contact anyone connected to us. We're done." I hung up and held Leon while he cried. Soundless, broken crying from a man who couldn't form words to express what he was feeling. "It's not true," I whispered to him. "You're not a burden, you're my husband. I choose to care for you. The money doesn't matter, you matter, only you matter." It took hours for him to calm down, and even then, he wouldn't sleep. He kept looking at me with these terrified eyes, like he was afraid I'd confirm what Marcus had said. The next morning, I met with the facility director and Patricia Kim. "I want Marcus Sutton banned from this facility permanently. What he did yesterday was elder abuse. He verbally assaulted my husband, who can't defend himself. I'm filing a formal complaint, and I want him prohibited from visiting." "We'll add him to the banned visitors list immediately," the director said. "Mrs. Sutton, I'm deeply sorry this happened. We've already implemented new procedures to prevent unauthorized visits. I also want to know, has anyone contacted you asking about moving Leon to a different facility or about my payment status?" They exchanged glances. Patricia spoke. "Yes. Someone called last week, identifying themselves as Leon's son, asking about costs of care and whether we'd discussed transitioning Leon to a lower level of care. We told them we only discuss care plans with you. They're trying to go around me, trying to pressure the facility to recommend cheaper care or suggest I can't afford this. Don't engage with them. All care decisions go through me." After that meeting, I went home and I sat in the quiet house, the house Leon and I had lived in for 42 years, and I felt the full weight of what I was fighting. They'd sabotaged my accounts. They'd harassed my family and Leon's care providers. They'd verbally abused Leon to manipulate him into feeling like a burden. And they weren't going to stop, because what they thought was the end, Leon's stroke, hadn't ended the way they expected. Leon was improving. I was managing. We were both still here, still fighting, still refusing to give them what they wanted. But I was tired, so tired. For the first time since Leon's stroke, I let myself cry. Really cry. Not quiet tears while holding Leon's hand, but deep, wrenching sobs for everything we'd lost and everything I was fighting to protect. I cried for the husband I'd had 6 months ago, strong, healthy, full of life. I cried for the son I'd raised, the one who'd apparently been replaced by someone who could abuse his own father to protect an inheritance. I cried for the life we'd had, and the life we had now, and the exhaustion of fighting constantly to protect both. And then I stopped crying, because crying didn't change anything. I called Raymond. I want to do something about the abuse incident, file a report, press charges, something that shows Marcus there are consequences for what he did. Elder abuse charges are difficult to prove without witnesses or recordings, but we can file a restraining order. Prohibit him from contacting you or Leon, coming near the facility or your home, or interfering with Leon's care. Do it. The restraining order hearing was brief. Marcus didn't even show up. His attorney argued that a son visiting his father and having a difficult conversation wasn't grounds for restraint. The judge disagreed. Mr. Sutton verbally assaulted an incapacitated patient, causing documented emotional distress. That's elder abuse. Restraining order granted. Mr. Sutton is prohibited from contact with Leon Sutton or Irene Sutton for 1 year. Any violation will result in arrest. 3 days after the restraining order was issued, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, it was Nadia. Irene, you've gone too far. A restraining order against Marcus. He's Leon's son. You're keeping him from his own father. Marcus abused Leon. He told a man who can't speak that he's a burden and should be in cheaper care so there's something left to inherit. That's abuse. The restraining order stands. You're turning Leon's stroke into a weapon against family. You're isolating Leon from everyone who cares about him because you're paranoid and controlling. Nadia, you and Marcus have sabotaged my accounts, harassed care providers, tried to have me declared incompetent, and verbally abused my husband. You've done everything possible to force me to give you control of assets you're not entitled to. The restraining order protects us from your harassment. When Leon dies and you're left alone, don't expect any help from us. You're destroying this family over money that should belong to all of us. The money belongs to Leon and me. Not to you, not to Marcus. When Leon dies, I'll still have money to live on. Because despite everything you've done to sabotage me, I'm managing fine. And Nadia, that must drive you crazy. That what you thought was the end turned out to just be a pause before we proved we're stronger than you assumed. She hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand, and I realized something important. They were getting desperate. The sabotage had failed. The abuse incident had backfired into a restraining order. Every attempt to prove I was failing had instead proven I was managing competently. They were running out of options, and desperate people do dangerous things. I needed to be ready for whatever came next. 2 weeks later, I found out what came next. And it was worse than anything I'd anticipated. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The call came from the facility at 6:47 a.m. I was barely awake when I heard Patricia Kim's voice, tense and apologetic. Mrs. Sutton, you need to come to the facility immediately. Adult Protective Services is here. They received a report that Leon is being neglected, and they're conducting an emergency investigation. I was there in 20 minutes, my heart pounding. When I arrived, 2 APS investigators were in Leon's room, examining him, reviewing his charts, talking to staff. Patricia pulled me aside. Someone filed a report claiming Leon has bed sores from inadequate care, that he's malnourished, that his hygiene is poor, and that you've been refusing recommended medical treatments. The investigators have to check everything. None of that is true. Leon's care is excellent. I know, we've told them that, but they have to complete their investigation. I waited in the family conference room while they examined Leon, interviewed staff, reviewed months of care records. After 2 hours, the lead investigator, Janet Rodriguez, came to speak with me. Mrs. Sutton, I want to be clear. We found no evidence of neglect. Leon's care is appropriate. His skin is healthy, no bed sores. His weight is stable and appropriate. His hygiene is good. All recommended treatments are being followed. Whoever filed this report either has very outdated information or deliberately made false claims. Can you tell me who filed the report? It was anonymous, but the caller specifically mentioned concerns about you being unable to afford appropriate care and cutting corners to save money. They also mentioned your age and recent stress as factors affecting your ability to oversee care properly. Marcus and Nadia. It had to be. Anonymous report specifically targeting my financial capacity and mental state, exactly the narrative they'd been building. This is harassment. My son and daughter-in-law have been trying to prove I'm incompetent to care for my husband. They've sabotaged my accounts, filed for guardianship, abused Leon verbally. Now they're filing false APS reports. If you believe you know who filed a false report, you can pursue legal action. Making knowingly false reports to APS is a crime. Janet left. The investigation was closed. No findings of neglect. Everything documented as appropriate care. But the damage was done. There was now an official APS investigation on record. Even though it found nothing wrong, Marcus and Nadia could point to it and say, see, there were concerns serious enough to trigger an investigation. I called Raymond. False APS report. Investigated, found nothing. But now there's a record they can use to claim there were concerns about Leon's care. Document it. Get the investigators' report in writing showing no findings. And Irene, this is criminal harassment now. False reports to government agencies. On top of the identity theft, the abuse, the sabotage, we need to consider filing criminal charges. Against my own son. Against people who are systematically harassing and abusing you and Leon. The fact that one of them is your son doesn't make it less serious. I thought about that for a long time. Criminal charges against Marcus, against my own child. 6 months ago, I would have said it was impossible, unthinkable. But 6 months ago, I also would have said it was impossible that Marcus would verbally abuse his incapacitated father or file false reports claiming Leon was being neglected. People change, or maybe they just reveal who they really were all along. That evening, I sat with Leon during dinner. He was eating better now. The feeding therapist had him on modified textures he could manage safely. He still couldn't speak, but he could nod, shake his head, make sounds that communicated meaning if you paid attention. Leon, sweetheart, I need to talk to you about something. He looked at me with those clear, aware eyes. Marcus and Nadia are getting worse. They filed a false report saying you weren't being cared for properly. The investigators found nothing wrong, but Leon, they're not going to stop. They're going to keep finding ways to harass us, to try to force me to give them control. He made a sound, sharp, angry. His left hand hit the wheelchair arm. I know you're angry. I am too. Leon, our attorney, thinks I should file criminal charges. Press charges for the abuse, the sabotage, the false reports, all of it. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he nodded, firm, decisive. You're sure he's our son? Another nod. Then he reached for my hand and squeezed it, and with enormous effort he made a sound that was almost a word. Protect. Protect. He wanted me to protect us, even if it meant pressing charges against our own son. Okay, I'll do it. The next morning, I met with Raymond and Detective Chen. We reviewed everything. The insurance sabotage, the credit card closure, the automatic payment cancellations, the abuse incident at the facility, the false APS report. Mrs. Sutton, this is a clear pattern of harassment and abuse, Detective Chen said. Identity theft, elder abuse, filing false reports. These are all criminal offenses. If you want to press charges, we have enough for prosecution. What happens if I do? We file charges. The DA reviews the case. If they agree to prosecute, Marcus and Nadia Chen will be arrested, arraigned, and face trial. If convicted, they're looking at felony charges. Identity theft alone carries potential prison time. Prison, my son in prison. But then I thought about Leon's face when he'd said protect. About the months of sabotage and harassment. About the fact that they'd verbally abused an incapacitated man and filed false reports claiming he was being neglected. File the charges. The arrests happened 1 week later. Marcus and Nadia were both charged with identity theft, elder abuse, filing false reports to government agencies, and conspiracy. The bail hearing was brief. Bail was set at $50,000 each. Marcus's father-in-law posted it. Then came the media attention I hadn't anticipated. Elderly woman presses charges against son for elder abuse, ran in the local paper. Then regional outlets picked it up. Son accused of sabotaging mother's accounts while father recovers from stroke. My phone started ringing. Reporters wanting interviews. Advocacy groups wanting to feature my story. Other elderly people who'd faced similar situations reaching out to tell me they understood. I didn't do interviews. I didn't want publicity. I just wanted to be left alone to care for Leon. But the attention had an unexpected effect. Other people started coming forward. A woman named Dorothy Chen, no relation to Nadia, called me. Mrs. Sutton, I read about your case in the paper. My daughter did the same thing to me. Sabotaged my accounts, tried to get guardianship, filed false APS reports. I didn't know I could press charges. Can you tell me how you did it? I connected her with Raymond. Then another person called, then another. Within 2 weeks, Raymond had 5 new clients. All elderly people whose adult children had tried to exploit them financially during medical crises or periods of vulnerability. Irene, your case is opening doors for other people, Raymond said. People who thought they had to just accept abuse from family. You're showing them they can fight back. I didn't feel like I was doing anything heroic. I was just protecting Leon and myself. But if that helped other people recognize and fight abuse, then something good was coming from this nightmare. The trial was scheduled for 4 months out. During those months, several things happened. First, Leon continued to improve. 7 months after his stroke, he'd regained enough function that he could stand with support. He still couldn't walk independently, still couldn't speak clearly, but he was progressing beyond what the initial prognosis had predicted. Your husband is a fighter, his physical therapist told me. Most stroke patients plateau around 6 months. Leon is still making gains. It's remarkable. What they'd thought was the end, permanent, complete incapacity, was turning into something different. Not full recovery, but better than anyone had expected. Second, my finances stabilized completely. With all the accounts secured, automatic payments restored, and careful management, I was not only covering Leon's care but actually building savings again. My financial advisor ran new projections. Mrs. Sutton, at your current spending rate, accounting for inflation and potential cost increases, you can sustain Leon's care indefinitely. Even if he lives another 20 years, you'll be financially stable. The claims that you'd bankrupt yourself were completely false. Third, Marcus's attorney approached Raymond with a plea deal offer. My clients are willing to plead guilty to lesser charges, misdemeanor harassment instead of felony identity theft and elder abuse, in exchange for probation and restitution. No jail time. They'd pay back all the money Mrs. Sutton spent on legal fees and security measures, plus a penalty. Raymond brought me the offer. It's a reasonable deal if you want to avoid trial. They'd have felony convictions reduced to misdemeanors, but they'd still have criminal records and would pay you back. What do you think I should do? That's not my decision. But I'll tell you this. If you take the deal, they learn that harassing and abusing you for months results in a fine they can pay. If you go to trial and they're convicted on the felony charges, they learn that actions have serious consequences. It's about whether you want resolution or justice. I thought about Leon, about the word he'd struggled to say, protect. I want justice. We're going to trial. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. Bank records showing the sabotaged accounts, testimony from the insurance company about unauthorized access, phone records from the burner phones used to close accounts, traced to locations near Marcus and Nadia's home and workplace, the facility staff testimony about Marcus's abuse of Leon, the APS investigators' report showing the false claims. The defense tried to paint it as a family misunderstanding. These were concerned family members trying to help an elderly woman who was overwhelmed. Every action was motivated by love and worry, not criminal intent. But the evidence told a different story. The prosecution called me to testify. Mrs. Sutton, walk us through what happened the day after your husband's stroke. I described standing in the hospital room, devastated, hearing Nadia on the phone. She said they needed to move fast before the assets were wasted on Leon's care, that they needed to get power of attorney while I was in shock. How did you feel hearing that? Betrayed. My husband had just had a catastrophic stroke. I was trying to figure out how to help him, and my son's wife was treating his tragedy as a financial opportunity. What did you do? I documented everything. I secured my accounts. I made sure my estate planning was protecting me because I knew they wouldn't stop, and they didn't. The prosecutor walked me through each incident: the insurance cancellation, the credit card closure, the automatic payment sabotage, the abuse of Leon, the false APS report. Mrs. Sutton, why didn't you just give them what they wanted? Because what they wanted was control of my life and my husband's care. They wanted me to move Leon to a cheaper facility to preserve inheritance. But Leon deserved better care than the bare minimum. He still deserves it. I wasn't going to sacrifice my husband's quality of life to protect money for people who saw his stroke as the end of our usefulness. The defense attorney cross-examined. Mrs. Sutton, isn't it possible your son was genuinely concerned about you? Genuine concern doesn't involve sabotaging someone's insurance or verbally abusing an incapacitated man. That's not concern. That's abuse designed to force compliance. Your son claims he was trying to protect you from financial ruin. I'm not in financial ruin. I was never headed for financial ruin. That was a lie they told to create panic. My finances are stable. Leon's care is sustainable. They weren't protecting me from anything except my own right to make decisions about my own life and my own husband. They called Leon to testify. They had to bring him to the courthouse in his wheelchair, with a speech therapist to help translate his limited vocalizations and gestures. The prosecutor asked simple yes-no questions Leon could answer with nods and sounds. Mr. Sutton, did your son Marcus visit you at the care facility in January? Nod. During that visit, did he tell you that you were a burden on your wife? Nod. Leon's left hand clenched. Did that conversation upset you? Strong nod. Leon made a sound pained, angry. Mr. Sutton, do you want to be in the care facility where you currently live? Nod. Do you believe your wife is taking good care of you? Emphatic nod. Leon reached for my hand. The defense attorney tried to suggest Leon couldn't possibly understand the questions or give reliable testimony given his impairments. The speech therapist shut that down. Mr. Sutton has aphasia affecting his speech production, not his comprehension. He understands everything. His yes-no responses are completely reliable. He's cognitively aware and capable of testifying. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts: identity theft, elder abuse, filing false reports, conspiracy. Marcus's face was blank. Nadia sobbed. The sentencing hearing was 2 weeks later. The judge reviewed the presentencing reports and victim impact statements. Then he looked at Marcus and Nadia. I've been on the bench for 18 years. I've seen many elder abuse cases, but this one is particularly disturbing because of its calculated nature and the vulnerability of the victims. You targeted Mrs. Sutton at her most vulnerable moment, her husband's catastrophic stroke. You saw her devastation and Leon's incapacity not as tragedy, but as opportunity. When she refused to give you control, you sabotaged her accounts to make her appear incompetent. When that didn't work, you abused an incapacitated stroke victim. When that didn't work, you filed false reports to government agencies. This was sustained, deliberate exploitation of elderly, vulnerable people. Mr. Sutton, you verbally abused your own incapacitated father. That alone is unconscionable. You're sentenced to 4 years in state prison. Mrs. Chen, you orchestrated much of this scheme. You're sentenced to 5 years. Additionally, you're both ordered to pay $127,000 in restitution to Mrs. Sutton for legal fees, security measures, and emotional distress. And you're permanently prohibited from contacting Leon or Irene Sutton or benefiting from their estates in any way. Marcus and Nadia were led away in handcuffs. I sat in the courtroom holding Leon's left hand and I felt, not triumph, not satisfaction, just exhausted relief. It was over, the harassment, the sabotage, the constant attacks. We could finally just live. However much time we had left together, we could live it without fighting constantly to protect ourselves. After the sentencing, reporters wanted interviews. I gave one statement. My husband had a stroke. What should have been about figuring out how to care for him became a fight to protect ourselves from people who saw his tragedy as their opportunity. We fought back. We won. And I hope other elderly people facing similar situations see this and understand. You don't have to accept abuse from family. You can fight back. You can protect yourself. What looks like the end might just be a pause before you prove you're stronger than anyone assumed. Over the following months, life found a new rhythm. Leon continued therapy. 10 months after his stroke, he could stand and take a few steps with a walker. He could say a handful of words. Irene, yes, no, love. Not conversations, but communication, connection. We celebrated our 52nd wedding anniversary in his room at the facility. I brought cake. The staff decorated. Leon used his left hand to feed me a bite of cake, and I fed him one, and we both cried because we were still here, still together, still fighting. The Roland Porter Foundation, a different foundation for elder abuse prevention that had read about my case, asked me to join their advisory board. I helped develop materials to teach elderly people how to recognize financial exploitation by family members and how to protect themselves. I spoke at senior centers, community groups, anywhere that would listen. What they thought was the end was just a pause. Don't let anyone use your pause, your crisis, your grief, your vulnerability as their opportunity. You're stronger than you feel in that moment. Document everything. Get help. Fight back. Raymond's practice grew. He was representing 12 elderly clients fighting financial exploitation by family members, all inspired by my case. And I lived in the house Leon and I had shared for 42 years, managing my finances carefully, visiting Leon daily, taking care of myself so I could take care of him. 1 year after Leon's stroke, I was sitting with him during his afternoon session when his speech therapist said, "Leon, tell Irene what we've been practicing." Leon looked at me, concentrated, and with tremendous effort said 4 words, "You are so strong." I burst into tears. Leon smiled, the crooked smile that was all his stroke-affected face could manage, but a smile nonetheless. "You're strong too, sweetheart. We both are. They thought your stroke was the end. They were wrong. It was just a pause. And look at us now, still here, still fighting, still together." 2 years after the stroke, Leon had progressed enough to come home for weekend visits with home health support. Not permanent, he still needed the facility's care during the week, but weekends at home, in his own bed, in his own living room, with his own wife. We'd sit on the back porch, me reading the paper aloud, him listening and occasionally interjecting the few words he could manage. It wasn't the life we'd had before, but it was a life. Our life, hard-won and precious. Marcus and Nadia served their sentences. I didn't visit them in prison. I didn't write letters. I didn't have contact at all. After Marcus was released after serving 3 years, he sent one letter. Mom, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect a relationship. I'm writing because my therapist says I need to take accountability without expecting anything in return. What I did to you and Dad was evil. I saw Dad's stroke as an opportunity to access money I felt entitled to. I treated your grief as a weakness to exploit. I verbally abused my own father. I sabotaged your accounts. I filed false reports. I destroyed our family for money I wasn't entitled to and didn't need. Prison gave me a lot of time to think about who I became, about how I let greed turn me into someone who could abuse his own parents. I can't undo what I did. I can't give you back the year you spent fighting me instead of just caring for Dad. I can't erase the trauma I caused. I can only tell you, you were right to fight back. You were right to press charges. You were right about everything. What you thought was the end, Dad's stroke, you turned into just a pause before you proved you were stronger than I ever gave you credit for. I'm sorry for all of it. Marcus. I read the letter, put it in a folder with all the other documents from those terrible months. I didn't respond. What would I say? That I forgave him? I didn't, not yet, maybe not ever. Marcus was my son. I'd raised him, loved him, and watched him turn into someone who could abuse his own incapacitated father for inheritance money. Some things you don't recover from. Some pauses don't lead to resumption. They lead to a different ending entirely. 3 years after Leon's stroke, I was 87. Leon was 79. He'd had a second, smaller stroke but recovered from it. We were still fighting, still here. The foundation asked me to keynote their national conference on elder abuse prevention. I stood at that podium and told our story to 800 people. They thought my husband's stroke was the end of our independence, our autonomy, our ability to protect ourselves. They thought grief and shock made me weak, easy to control, ripe for exploitation. They were wrong. What they thought was the end was just a pause. A terrible pause where I had to figure out how to care for my husband, protect our assets, and defend myself against people who saw tragedy as opportunity. But pauses aren't endings. They're moments where you stop, reassess, and figure out how to move forward differently. I'm 87 years old. My husband is 79, 3 years post-stroke, living in a care facility with weekend visits home. That's not the life we planned, but it's our life, and we fought for every piece of it. Don't let anyone use your pause, your crisis, your loss, your vulnerable moment as their opportunity. You're stronger than you feel in that moment. You have rights. You can fight back. And if you do fight back, document everything. Get evaluations proving competence. Secure your accounts. File police reports. Press charges if necessary. What looks like the end might just be a pause before you prove you're stronger than anyone assumed. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Afterward, dozens of people came to me. Elderly people who'd faced similar situations. Adult children ashamed of what their siblings had done. Professionals who wanted to help. Your story gave me courage to fight back, an 83-year-old woman told me, crying. My son was trying to get guardianship. I thought I had to just accept it, but you showed me I could defend myself. I got a lawyer. I won, thank you. That night, I visited Leon, told him about the conference, about the woman who'd fought back and won. He smiled, squeezed my hand, said one word, proud. Proud of me. Nod. I'm proud of you too, Leon. You kept fighting when they said you'd never improve. You proved them wrong about everything. We sat together in his facility room, not the ending we'd imagined, but a pause that had become its own kind of life. What they thought was the end was just a pause. And in that pause, we built something they never expected. Resilience, advocacy, proof that elderly people facing crises aren't weak or incompetent. They're survivors fighting to protect what matters. Leon's stroke wasn't the end of our story. It was just the pause before we wrote a different ending than anyone anticipated. If this story touched you, please subscribe, like, and turn on the notification bell for more emotional stories like this. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Somewhere out there, I might be reading.